So here we are in the SQL BI virtual machine for the course. I've installed the GeoFlow add-in, and I've also connected a second external network adapter to this virtual machine so that I have access to the internet. If you are doing this in the classroom, obviously you can do that yourself, just add a second network adapter, or you could use the TMG virtual machine that's used in courses 10777 and 10778. But either way, we create an internet connection from this virtual machine, and that's required to show the map from Bing Maps in the GeoFlow add-in. So I've gone ahead and added the various bits and pieces I need. I've run the setup file for Lab 8, and I'm now ready to go ahead and start working with GeoFlow. So the first thing I need to do is create a Power Pivot model. I need to have some data in the data model in the workbook. So I'm going to go ahead and use Power Pivot to connect to our data warehouse, which is on the MIA SQL BI virtual machine. So connect to that database. Just to make things quick, I'm just going to select some tables rather than enter any sort of query, and I'll take the customer table and the internet sales fact table. So a really simple data model here, just import those two tables, and I'm just going to create a relationship between the two tables so that the customer key in the internet sales table is connected to the customer key in the customer table. So that's it, that's the data model, really simple, that's all we need. Let's go ahead and close that, and now I can start using my GeoFlow add-in. So after I install GeoFlow, on the Insert tab there's a new map icon here in a GeoFlow section, and the only option I have at this point is to launch GeoFlow because I haven't created any previous maps in here. And when I launch it, this is the GeoFlow interface that I get. So a GeoFlow tour, as it's called, consists of a number of scenes. So I'll give the tour a name here, and I could create multiple tours within the same workbook and you know, view them all one by one. And then within each tour, I can have multiple scenes. And a scene is, think of it as being a bit like a slide in PowerPoint. It's got a visualization on it which might have one or more layers of data, and then I can move on to the next scene and effectively present some data using the map as a backdrop. So we're only going to have one scene in this particular tour, and what I'm going to do is first of all I need to choose the fields that are the geographic fields that determine where data gets plotted on the map. And I can choose a number of different geographic type fields which will be recognized automatically by GeoFlow, so city, country, and I could also scroll further down here and choose the state or province and postal code. And you'll see down here in the geography tab that it's mapped city to the city type of field. There's a number of different types of geographic field I could use. I could actually specify latitude and longitude and so forth. So it's mapped city to city, country to country, state or province to state or province. It hasn't figured out that postal code is just another way of saying zip code for those of us who don't live in the US. So we'll go ahead and choose zip code. And so I've chosen these are the fields in my data set that represent geographic locations. If I click Map It, it's going to first of all take the first of those fields, which is city, and do its best to match the values that I have in that data set for the city field with values that it knows about on the map. So it's mapping the cities that it knows about. It's come up with a 76% match with high confidence, and I could actually drill into that and see the ones that it couldn't match. So it's been unable to match, surprisingly it's been unable to match things like Berlin in the state of Hamburg in the country of Germany, and that may be because Berlin isn't in the state of Hamburg in Germany. So it's managed to find those the values that make sense within the data set. I could also switch around and change to show postal code or zip, and off it goes and finds the various postal codes or zip codes that it recognizes and plots them on the map. And similarly with state, country, any of these things, it's effectively going to go and map them and locate them on the map. So I'm going to stick with city, and if I zoom around the map, you can see it's found all the cities in the US, nothing much happening in Asia or in Africa, but there's a few things happening in Europe here as well. So it's found a lot of the values that I have in my data set there as cities. Well, that's great, but I want to do more than just simply plot the locations on the map. I want to actually visualize some data. So the next thing I want to do is choose which of the values I have I want to actually visualize. So I'll collapse the customer table and have a look at the internet sales table, and really what I'm interested in here is the sales amount. So if I select the sales amount, I get this legend appear, and I can just resize that and move it out of the way so that it's not getting in my way as I try and view the map. We'll just make it a little bit smaller and put it down here. And you can see that it's actually now showing sales amount for each city as a column value. Now the actual value that it's showing is the height of the column in this instance, and it's the sum of the sale amount by default. And I could change the aggregation that I'm using there to something else if I wanted to show the average or the count or something like that. But we'll go with sum. And the default chart type is a column chart, as we've seen, but I could change that. I could show, for example, a heat map that shows the intensity of sales values. It's great if you're plotting weather, temperature on a map, for example. Or I could use a bubble, in which case the size of the bubble indicates the sales volume in that location. I'll stick with a column chart, and that looks pretty reasonable to me. I can browse around and see those values. What else I might want to do here, if I scroll down, you'll see that there's an option to categorize the data. So if I brought in the product table and I had the product category, I could categorize it so that we'd see 4 different colored columns, one for each of the different product categories that AdventureWorks sells, for example. I'm going to leave mine uncategorized and just simply show the total sales. But I am interested in this time option here, because one of the things that we can do, because it's a tour, because it's an animation that we sit and watch, we can actually see time lapse of how the data values change over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the order date field into the time box here, and I get this little time decorator appear on the map. What I actually want to do is I want to increment this by month rather than just by each second of the day. So I get a number of options for how I want to do the incrementing of that. I'll go with month, and I'm going to modify the legend here so that it's just simply displaying the month name and the year. And again, just like with the other legend, I can resize that and move it out of the way down to here or wherever it might be. We'll put it there for the time being. So the other thing to do with time is the time settings. In other words, as time passes, how do I want to show the data? And by default it's going to accumulate so that the columns will get larger as more sales are recorded as time goes by. But I could choose just to show instantaneous values. So in other words, it would show me the sales for a month, and in the next month the column would resize to show the sales for the next month. Or I can persist the last value, so when we get to the end it shows the final value. I'm going to go with time accumulation so that we see sales growing over time. And now that I've got all the data on the map that I'm interested in, I want to start making some changes to the configurations for the scene. So we'll go into the settings for the scene. Actually, I need to select the scene first of all. And yeah, there we go. So we're in the settings for the scene. By default it's going to last for 6 seconds, which I don't really think is long enough for what I want, so I'm going to increase that to 15. And I could give the scene a name. If I had multiple scenes in a tour, I could give each of them a name, for example, to make it easier. There's a transition duration, so there's going to be transitions as the timeline elapses. So how long does each duration, each transition last is what's here, and it's 3 seconds for each one. And there's an effect. So in other words, rather than just statically view the map and see the values increase, we can move around the map, so we get this more kind of detailed motion around the map as the values go by. And there's a number of built-in different sort of animations that we can use. I'm going to choose Dolly, which is actually going to be used to effectively rotate the globe as we view it. And I'll zoom out to get a starting point where we can actually see the whole globe. And now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to play the tour, and as I do so, we see the globe rotate, and we see the values start to appear on the map. You can see the time elapsing down here as we go through, and those values are getting bigger. Clearly there's a lot of sales happening over here. And when we get to the animation, it stops, but I can still browse around just like you would on Bing Maps on the internet. I can click and drag to browse around, or if I've got a touch device, I could obviously just use my fingers, and I can zoom in, and I can actually start to explore those individual values. And if I hover over a column, I get the details of the data point appearing on the map as well. So it's a very interesting way to look at data that has both a geographical dimension and a temporal dimension. In other words, it accumulates over time, and I can see how that data changes in terms of place and time using this approach. And when I'm finished, I can go back into the GeoFlow editor, and I can add more scenes or change the data or change the animations. And when I'm finished with that, I can close the GeoFlow editor, and I'm back into my Excel workbook.